Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Stepmate. Episode 5. Chapter 60 The Reception. Dimitri's POV. I couldn't stop smiling. I was floating on clouds and I felt like I was high. I probably was. I was high on her. I was high on her presence, her scent, and her words. She said that she was mine. She confirmed it. The only things that were missing were my mark on her neck and my ring on her finger. She would get both of those soon. I already had a ring for her. I was just waiting for the perfect moment to ask her to marry me. I kept a tight hold on her hand as we were walking through the crowd. Everyone wanted to congratulate her. Everyone wanted to meet her. They kept approaching us, smiling, and telling her how lucky I am to have a Luna as beautiful as she was. She kept blushing and I kept grinning. They were completely right. I was a lucky bastard. She was beautiful and kind. She was everything I wanted and needed. I was so happy that now everyone knew who she was to me. I was happy because I could finally rip a head off of anyone who looked at her lustfully. I purposely kept her away from my mother. I could see the annoyed look on my mother's face, and I didn't want to burden Maddie with that. She was nervous enough. "You have pretty hair, Luna," I heard a little kid say. Maddie crouched down to be eye to eye with the little girl who was smiling brightly at my mate. She let my hand go and I had to hold back a growl. I really didn't want her to let go of me in such a big crowd. "It's not as pretty as yours," Maddie said with a small smile on her face. "Who did your braids?" The little girl looked up. "My mom did. She knows how to do them better than my dad. He always messes them up." Maddie chuckled and my heart grew double. "Your mom makes the most beautiful braids," Maddie said softly and the little girl grinned widely. "Thank you, Luna," the little girl said. Her mom smiled at Maddie and me. She congratulated us and took the little girl away. Maddie never stopped smiling at her. "I can't wait to have a child with you." I mind-linked her and she looked at me. "You are going to be a wonderful mom." I was getting hard just thinking about her being pregnant. I could imagine how incredibly beautiful she was going to be and it was making my whole body tremble and need. "I am a bit young to be a mom." She mind-linked me back and I smiled. "I know, princess," I said as I pulled her to me and kissed the top of her head. "We have all the time in the world to be parents. I want to enjoy just being with you first." She smiled at me and my heart skipped a beat. I wanted to grab her and take her to our room. I wanted to take her away from this crowd and enjoy her. I had one more thing to do before that, though. I had to introduce her to the council members. I smiled back at her and took her hand in mine. I looked around the room until my eyes landed on Landon. He was standing by the dessert table and talking to Ryan and Kendrick. I took a deep breath and started approaching them. I smiled at my pack members as I passed them by. They bowed their heads and continued smiling brightly at my mate. Landon looked at me as we approached them. Kendrick, being the youngest and the biggest man slut, started eyeing my mate up and down. I tensed up immediately. I would rip his head off if he touched her. He could be a member of 1,000 councils, but he wasn't going to escape my rage. "Alpha Dimitri," Landon said politely as he bowed his head a little. "Congratulations on finding your mate." "Thank you, Landon," I said, keeping my eyes on Kendrick. "I've never been happier." Maddie squeezed my hand and took a step closer to me. I could tell that she wasn't comfortable with the way Kendrick was looking at her. My anger grew and I was ready to pluck his eyes out. "Kendrick, Landon said calmly, and Kendrick finally looked away from my mate. He looked at me and smirked. It was barely noticeable, but it pissed me off. Alpha Dimitri, Kendrick said. Congratulations. She is beautiful. I tightened my jaw and pulled Maddie even closer. I forced a smile on my face. She is, I said. She is beautiful and mine. Ryan laughed and shook his head. No need to stake your claim, Alpha, Ryan said with a small smirk on his face. She is beautiful, but we are a bit too old for her. I gritted my teeth but kept a fake smile on my face. I hated them and I hated having to be polite toward them. I looked away from them and focused on my love. I placed my hands on her shoulders and made her stand in front of me. I made sure that I was holding her close. These are the council members, Madeline, I said, trying to sound calm. Landon is the Lord Chancellor of our kingdom. Ryan is Lord Protector, and Kendrick is the Royal Secretary. Maddie nodded and reached out to shake their hands. I almost lost it when Kendrick took her hand in his. There was a flash of lust in his eyes and I almost shifted at the spot. It is nice to meet you, Maddie said politely. It is very nice to meet you too, Luna, Landon said, taking her hand in his. I am looking forward to us working together. I wasn't looking forward to it. All three of them were slimy, money-grabbing leeches. The only reason I had to put up with them was because of an agreement between the three fallen kingdoms. Dimitri? My love mind linked me. I leaned in to kiss the top of her head. Yes, princess? I asked her. Is it okay if we take a little break? She asked. My head hurts. My heart raced and I started worrying immediately. Her head hurt? Why? Was something wrong? I looked at Landon and gave him a forced, but polite smile. Will you please excuse us, I said, bowing my head a little. My mate and I should continue greeting our pack members. After all, some of them traveled from far to be here. Of course, Alpha, Landon said. We will have time to discuss everything later. I gave him a small nod and took Maddie's hand in mine. Goodbye, Maddie said politely as I started pulling her away. I needed to get her away from there. I needed to get a pack doctor to check on her. I needed to make sure that she was okay. Dimitri's POV. What's wrong, love? I asked as soon as I closed the door behind us. I took her back to our office. I knew that no one would disturb us here. I cupped her cheeks and kissed her forehead. She didn't feel warm. She didn't have a temperature. It's the mind link, she mumbled. I am still getting a hold of it. I furrowed my eyebrows a little. Mind linking made her head hurt? What do you mean, princess? I asked as I caressed her cheek. Mind linking shouldn't hurt. She sighed and shook her head a little. It doesn't hurt really, she said. It's just a bit exhausting hearing them talk to me all the time. I can even distinguish who is who and I can't even respond. I would like to respond, though. I wouldn't want them to think that I am ignoring them. I was confused. What was she talking about? It is easy with you, she added. I guess it is because you are my mate. I was really confused. Maybe she was confused too. Maybe she was tired. So much happened in the past 24 hours. Her whole life turned upside down. She was probably really confused and tired. I took her hand in mine and approached the couch. I sat down and pulled her onto my lap. She straddled me and leaned her head on my shoulder. I started playing with her ponytail and rubbing her back gently. She sighed contently. Thank you, she mumbled quietly. Your touch silenced it down a little bit. I had no idea mind links were so intense. I furrowed my eyebrows again. Mind links weren't intense. They were like talking. You had nothing to silence. If you didn't want to mind link someone, you simply blocked them. I turned my head and kissed her cheek. She smiled a little and my heart skipped a beat. I started rubbing her temples gently and she relaxed even more. She took a deep breath and released it slowly. How is that, princess? I asked quietly. It is the best, she mumbled. Thank you so much. You don't have to thank me, I said. You are my mate and I will always take care of you. You will never be in pain when I am around. I hated seeing her hurt. When I cut her palm, a wave of pain washed over me. I couldn't wait to finish the ceremony so I could heal her. She lifted her head a little and gave me a small smile. How are you dealing with it? She asked. Will you teach me how to distinguish the voices and respond? I furrowed my eyebrows again. I leaned in and kissed the tip of her nose. Her words confused and scared me. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. I couldn't figure out how couldn't she distinguish the links and respond. Can you explain what exactly you hear, princess? I asked softly. I needed more information before I tried talking to her about it. I didn't want to scare her. Well, the voices, she said, sighing tiredly. There are a lot of them in my head. I can't seem to figure out who exactly they belong to. The only one I managed to figure out was yours. That was easy. She furrowed her eyebrows and bit her lower lip. The rest of them are just a tangled mess, she continued. I wanted to respond to them, but I simply couldn't figure out who was trying to mind link me. She shook her head and sighed again. It's just a bit overwhelming, she added. I'm not used to mind linking and feeling the emotions of so many people. I froze. What was she talking about? Feeling the emotions of so many people? My heart started racing and a wave of fear washed over me. She isn't talking about mind links, Dimitri, Skol said calmly. I tightened my jaw and gulped. What do you know? I asked him, but he ignored me. Skol. I shouted after he didn't respond. I felt him pull back and the anger inside me exploded. He knew something about my mate, but he refused to tell me. I was going to stick his own claws up his ass. Maddie's content sigh made me focus back on her. She closed her eyes and got herself comfortable in my arms. I tightened my hold on her and kissed her cheek again. Whose emotions can you feel, princess? I asked, trying to stop my voice from trembling. Maddie opened her beautiful eyes and looked at me. She furrowed her eyebrows a little and studied my face for a second. Well, everyone's, she said, making my heart stop. I was never told that was also a part of mind linking, though. I gulped and caressed her cheek. I took a deep breath and leaned in to kiss the tip of her nose. It's not, Maddie, I said softly. I can't feel other people's emotions. I can't hear them in my head all the time. Her eyes widened a little. She lifted her head and sat up in my lap. I kept my hands on her hips, making sure that she couldn't stand up. I couldn't let go of her. What are you talking about? She asked quietly. I took another deep breath and tightened my hold on her. I don't know what is going on, Maddie, but what you can hear and feel is not mind linking, I said. This is mind linking. I finished my sentence through our mind link. Can you hear the difference between mine and other voices? Her eyes widened even more. I saw fear flash in her eyes and I pulled her to my chest immediately. Don't be afraid, Princess, I said softly. We will figure it out. I promise. We will fix it. I will fix it. Maddie wrapped her arms around me tightly. She pressed her body against mine and I could feel her shaking. My heart broke. I hated seeing her afraid or hurt. I hated it. I am here, my love, I said, wrapping my arms around her. I am here and I am never leaving. We will figure it out. I turned my head to kiss her temple just as I heard Will approaching my office. He entered without knocking. Dimitri, the guests are, he spoke but stopped as soon as he saw us. His eyebrows furrowed and I saw worry on his face. What happened? He asked worriedly. Are you okay, Mads? Come inside and close the door, I told him and he listened to me. I had to tell him what happened. He could help us figure this out. What is happening to me? I was so scared. I could clearly hear their voices inside my head. I felt their emotions like they were my own. What was happening to me? Come inside and close the door, Dimitri said to Beta Will and my heart raced. No, please. I mind-linked Dimitri. He will think that I am crazy. He won't, princess. Dimitri said as he turned his head and kissed my temple again. He will take this seriously, I promise. He ran his hand down my back gently. I felt a wave of calmness wash over me. We need to figure this out, my love. Dimitri continued. He is my best friend and your biggest protector. He would never think that you are crazy. I gulped and felt my heart race. But what if? Beta Will sat on the couch next to us. Is everything okay, Mads? He asked worriedly. Are you hurt? The genuine concern in his voice made me relax slightly. It sounded like he really cared about me. Will you explain, princess, or would you like me to do it? Dimitri asked. I took a deep breath and lifted my head. Dimitri let me sit up, but he never moved his hands away from me. I knew he wouldn't let me get up. I didn't even want to. I felt safe with him. I couldn't hear the voices when I was in his arms. Everything was quiet and peaceful. Can you do it, please? I asked quietly. I knew that I wouldn't be able to explain well. I was embarrassed and afraid. My voice would shake and nothing would come out. Of course, princess, Dimitri said as he lifted his hand and caressed my cheek. He looked at Beta Will who was smiling at us. Before you start I just want to say thank you to Maddie, Beta Will said and I furrowed my eyebrows. I've never seen Dimitri this happy and I have you to thank for that. My heart clenched painfully. I almost left him. I wanted to leave him. A small part of me was still screaming at me that I didn't belong with him. I was still somehow sure that he would be better off without me. Madeline, Dimitri said sternly and I looked at him. He raised an eyebrow at me. Sky is telling me everything, he said. Enough. You promised. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I am sorry. I mind-linked him. I am afraid. What if there is something wrong with me? You don't need a sick Luna. You need. I need you, Madeline. He stopped me as he narrowed his eyes and tightened his hold on me. You are not sick and I wouldn't be better off without you. Stop saying it. Stop thinking about it. Can someone please explain what is going on? Beta Will asked, interrupting our conversation. Both Dimitri and I looked at him. Dimitri sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. Maddie asked me to take a small break because her head was hurting. Dimitri started speaking and I tensed up. We came here and she told me that the mind linking was a bit exhausting and that she needed a little break. Beta Will furrowed his eyebrows. My heart raced. I was a bit confused, so I asked her to explain. Dimitri continued as he pulled me to him again. She said that they can't distinguish the voices inside her head and respond to them. She also said that it was exhausting feeling everyone's emotions. Beta Will's eyes widened. He looked at me and I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. Dimitri kissed the top of my head. There is nothing to be ashamed of, my princess. He mind-linked me. I was starting to hear the difference between mind-linking and whatever the other thing was. Mind-linking was just like talking face-to-face. I could hear the voice of the person who was mind-linking me clearly. I could block the mind-link. I couldn't block the voices I heard. The voices weren't clear. They were a complete mess, and I couldn't even figure out what they were saying. You can't feel emotions through mind-link, Beta Will mumbled, keeping his eyes on me. I explained that. Dimitri sighed. I told her that what she was feeling and hearing wasn't mind-linking. It was something else. Beta Will looked at Dimitri and nodded. Do you have an idea what could it be? He asked, and Dimitri tensed up a bit. I looked up at him and saw him staring at Beta Will with an unreadable expression on his face. Maybe I do, he mumbled, and I froze. But I am not sure if I am right. I'm not sure if it's even possible. My stomach started spinning in circles and I felt like I was going to throw up. Tell us, Beta Will said nervously. I wasn't sure that I wanted to hear it. Dimitri looked at me and gave me a small smile. He lifted his hand and caressed my cheek. I think that Maddie is reading their minds, Dimitri said, and my whole world stopped spinning. She has powers. I think she is special. Reading their minds? What? No. That was impossible. My eyes widened and I was just about to speak, but Beta Will interrupted me. That was my first thought, he said, and I looked at him with a shocked expression on my face. Were they serious? We need to find someone who could know a bit more about this, Dimitri said, making me look back at him. We need to find out what exactly is it and what does it mean. Dimitri caressed my cheek again. He leaned in and kissed my lips softly. We need to find out who you really are, Maddie, Dimitri added softly. I am pretty sure this has something to do with Sky refusing to shift. Dimitri added through the mind link. She knows what is going on, Maddie. My eyes widened. Of course. Sky knew. She had to know. Sky. I called her. What is happening to me? I've had enough. Dimitri's POV. I will be back soon, princess, I said as I kissed her softly. I didn't want to leave her, but I had to go back to the reception. I could tell that she felt better when I was with her. I could tell that she didn't want me to leave her. I can come with you, she said, but I saw how tired she was. I wasn't surprised. If I was right and she could really read people's minds, that must have been exhausting. No, love, I said, giving her a small smile. Stay here and rest. I will be back soon and we will go to our room. I didn't get a chance to grab her stuff, but she would be okay for a night. She could sleep in my shirt and I had everything she could possibly need. Keep her safe, I said as I looked at Will. Mind link me if anything happens. He nodded and gave me a small smile. Don't worry, Will said. She will be okay. I kissed her forehead and reluctantly let her go. She looked at me and gave me a small smile. It didn't reach her eyes, though. I will be right back, okay? I said, trying to stop myself from pulling her back to me. I would never leave if I did. She nodded and I started walking out of the room. I had to leave before I changed my mind and stayed. I closed the door behind me and felt my heart tugging to go back to her. I really hated leaving her alone. Not being able to see her and touch her was driving me crazy. I took a deep breath and rushed downstairs. The sooner I got everything done, the sooner I could go back to her. Dimitri. I heard Mike's voice as soon as I walked back into the reception. I looked at him and he waved me over to where he and my mother were standing. "Where is Maddie?" Mike asked as soon as I approached them. "We wanted to congratulate her." "You want to congratulate her?" my mother mumbled angrily. I looked at her and tightened my jaw. I really had enough of the way she was behaving. "Enough, mother," I said angrily. "She is my mate and you will have to accept that." My mother rolled her eyes and the anger exploded inside me. "What do you have against her?" I asked, trying to stop myself from growling. "What did she ever do to you?" My mother clenched her fists and narrowed her eyes at me. "She isn't made to be the queen," she said angrily. "She isn't made to be the Luna of my pack. She is just some poor, orphan girl who deserves to be cast aside." My eyes widened. Skol started thrashing and growling. I wanted to scream at her, but Mike beat me to it. "Janet," he exclaimed angrily. "Take that back. That is my daughter you are talking about." My mother snickered and looked at Mike. "Your daughter," she mocked. "The one you left? You knew all those years ago that she wasn't worth your time. Maybe you could talk some sense into my son." Oh, I saw red. I didn't have time to react, though. Mike growled and his canines elongated. He grabbed my mother's arm and started pulling her away. "Dimitri." My mother mind-linked me, but I ignored her. "Deal with her, Mike." I mind-linked him instead of her. "Do not come back to the reception. I don't want to make a scene." Mike turned around and gave me a small nod. I could see how annoyed he was. I was angry too, but my pack members were all around us and I really didn't want them to witness me strangling my mother. "Alpha," I heard Kendrick's voice behind me. I turned around and saw him smiling at me. His smile, just like everything he did and said, was fake. "Kendrick," I said politely. "Are you enjoying the party?" "Very much so, Alpha," he said, bowing his head a little. "I would enjoy it even more if your beautiful Luna was here." I tightened my jaw and gulped. I had to fight so hard to keep a smile on my face. "She asked to be excused," I said calmly. "She had a really big day and she is a bit tired." Kendrick smiled and my stomach turned. He always gave me chills and that feeling intensified now that I had a mate. He was a man in his mid-40s. He was bald, pale, and he always looked sweaty. He was overweight and he actually looked a lot older than he was. Every time I saw him he was wearing royal robes. I wondered if he had any other clothes in his closet. "Oh, that is such a shame," Kendrick said, sighing quietly. "She is a real beauty and I think that I will enjoy spending time with her. Please let her know that I am looking forward to seeing her again." The anger intensified and I had a really hard time keeping a smile on my face. I wished that I could somehow stop him from seeing her, but I knew it wasn't possible. She was a queen and she had to work with the council members. "I will let her know," I said, trying to sound calm. "Thank you, Kendrick." He gave me another fake smile, bowed a little, and walked away. I clenched my fists and wished that I could strangle him. I didn't like any member of the council, but I hated Kendrick. There was something about him that made my skin crawl. I took a deep breath and started walking through the crowd. I stopped to talk to some of my pack members. Everyone asked about Maddie and it made me happy, They already liked her and cared about her. Is everything okay? I mind-linked Will. Yes. He responded. We are talking and getting to know each other. Will you come back soon? Yes. I said. I just need to say goodbye to everyone. Good. Will said. I think that your presence helps her with the voices. She has been struggling ever since you left. My heart raced and my need to protect Maddie exploded inside me. I will be right there, I said as I hurried to the stage. I already missed her anyway. I wanted to go back to her as soon as possible. The voices. Madeline's POV. The voices came back in full force as soon as Dimitri left the room. My heart raced and I tried so hard to ignore them. My head felt like it was going to explode and I just wanted Dimitri to come back. Everything was better when he was here. I couldn't take him away from his pack, though. He was an alpha. He had a job. He couldn't be with me all the time. Maddie. Beta Will called me and I looked at him. He sat down next to me and gave me a small smile. Are you okay? He asked and I nodded. I am fine, I said. I am just a little bit tired. I wasn't lying, though. I was tired. I was exhausted. And hearing all those voices inside my head was making it worse. I wanted Dimitri. I wanted him to wrap his arms around me. I wanted to close my eyes and sleep. Can you hear them again? Beta Will asked worriedly. I swallowed the lump in my throat and gave him a small nod. It's easier when Dimitri is here, isn't it? He asked as a small smile spread across his face. I nodded again and his smile grew. I can't explain to you how happy I am that he finally got you, Beta Will said. It's been so hard watching him having to go through all that shit. In the past 9 months. I wanted him to tell you sooner, but he refused. He wanted you to experience it all. My heart clenched painfully and I looked down at my lap. If he had told me that I was his mate before I turned 18, I would have probably run away. I was so ashamed to admit it, but it was the truth. I wanted to leave the pack ever since I got here. If I found out that I was going to be tied to this place forever, I would have left before I got a chance to experience the bond. I wasn't sure if I could leave him now. I started to love him. I loved him. I loved him with every part of my heart and soul. I belonged to him. I wanted to feel his body against mine. I wanted to be surrounded by his scent. I wanted to be around him. No, I couldn't leave him anymore. I know it's a shock, Maddie, but you are not alone, Beta Will spoke again and I looked up at him. You have Dimitri. He is an amazing man and he is going to be an amazing mate. He already is. He smiled and I nodded. He really was an amazing mate. He'd done so much for me already. You have me as well, Beta Will continued. It is my duty as a beta to keep you safe. You are my Luna and we have our own bond that I can't and don't want to break. The need and the duty to protect you is written in my blood. He smiled and took my hand in his. But I also want to be here as a friend, Maddie, not just a protector, he added softly. I know that we just met and it will take you a while to relax around me, but I really want to be your friend. I want to be here for you and I want to help you through everything. I want to do it for you and for Dimitri. I felt tears in the corners of my eyes. Thank you, I said, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I am sure that we will be great friends. I needed to find a way to relax a little first. I needed to find a way to stop feeling so guilty. I needed to find a way to let myself believe that I was really Dimitri's mate and the Luna of this pack. It was surreal, though. Everything just felt like a dream. I was planning on leaving the pack just a few hours ago and now I was a part of it. I can't help but think that you are a bit unsure about everything, Maddie, Betrayal said after a few moments of silence. I sighed and gave him a small nod. I am having a hard time believing it, I said honestly. I feel like I'm going to wake up and realize I was dreaming the entire time. Betrayal smiled and shook his head. It's not a dream, he said. I know it feels like it, especially with how fast everything is going, but it's not a dream, Mads. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. I just hope that I will be a good Luna, I mumbled quietly. I hope that I will be worthy of Dimitri. Betrayal squeezed my hand and smiled at me. You will be an amazing Luna, he said. You are already worthy of Dimitri. He should be worried about being worthy of you. Betrayal winked and I chuckled a little. Don't worry so much, Mads, Betrayal continued. That man is head over heels in love with you and has been for the past 9 months. He fought so hard for you even before you knew who he was to you. He obviously thinks that you are more than worthy of him. My heart skipped a beat and I felt like crying. I really needed to talk to him. I really needed to apologize for the way I behaved after I found out about him being my mate. I hurt him so much and he had done nothing but love me and care for me. The voices inside my head suddenly got louder. I groaned and placed my hand on my forehead. Dimitri is on his way, he said worriedly. He will be here in a few minutes. I looked at him and furrowed my eyebrows. What about the reception? I asked. You are more important than that, Maddie, he said. Besides, the pack doesn't need him to eat and have fun. He will just give a short speech, thank them all for coming, and he is coming back. I nodded and felt a wave of relief wash over me. Is it bad? Will asked quietly. I furrowed my eyebrows and sighed. It's louder, I said and he nodded. Okay, he said softly. Just a few more minutes and he will be here. I looked at the door and gulped. I couldn't wait to see him again. I couldn't wait to be in his arms again. Apology. Dimitri's POV. I couldn't wait to go back to my office. My arms were burning with a need to hold her. I was in pain knowing that she was in pain. I couldn't wait to get there and hug her. I missed her so much. I had 9 months worth of needing her and wanting her to compensate. Being away from her even for a few minutes was a complete waste of my time. I finally reached my office and opened the door. Her scent filled my lungs and my body relaxed completely. She looked up at me and smiled. Princess, I mumbled as I closed the door and rushed to her. My heart melted when she reached out for me. I groaned quietly when I finally touched her. I pulled her to me and hugged her tightly. I placed a hand on her head and kissed her temple. Does it hurt? I asked and she shook her head. Not anymore, she said and I smiled. I looked at Will and saw him grinning at me. I rolled my eyes at him. Can you please go downstairs and make sure that everything is going smoothly? I asked as I ran my fingers through Maddie's hair. Of course, Will said. Do you need anything else? No, I said, shaking my head. I will see you tomorrow. Will nodded and looked at Maddie. He smiled a little. Bye, Mads, he said and she looked up at him. Goodbye, Will, she said, smiling back at him. I couldn't help but caress her cheek. She was so beautiful that I needed to touch her to make sure that she was real. I still couldn't believe that she was mine. I heard Will walking away, but I never moved my eyes from Maddie. I couldn't stop looking at her. I simply couldn't get enough of her. I heard the door close and Maddie looked at me. She lifted her hand and cupped my cheek. My heart raced and I leaned more into her touch. My whole body was trembling and my heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest. She was studying my face for a few moments before she leaned in and kissed me. My heart stopped beating. I groaned and tangled my fingers into her hair. I pressed her closer and deepened the kiss. It was the first time she initiated it and I was sure that I would explode with happiness. She stopped kissing me, but she didn't move away. She leaned her forehead against mine and took a deep breath. "I am sorry, Dimitri," she said quietly and my breath got caught in my throat. What was she sorry about? Did she kiss me like that because she was going to leave me? No, 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 no. I tightened my hold on her. She reached out and ran her fingers through my hair. "I am sorry for trying to reject you when I found out," she said quietly. "I am sorry for the way I've been acting. She stopped talking and took a deep breath. I relaxed a little. She wasn't leaving me. Not that I would let her, but it was nice to know that she wanted me as well. "I am angry at Mike," she continued. "I didn't want to stay here. I didn't want to be near him. I wanted to leave this pack from the moment I was told that I would be living here." She lifted her head a little and caressed my cheek. "I tried to reject you because I wanted to run away from Mike and I am so sorry about that," she added. "You didn't deserve that and I will spend the rest of my life making up for it." I sighed in relief and kissed her softly. "I love you, Madeline," I mumbled against her lips. "You have nothing to make up for. You made up for it the moment you stayed and let me love you." She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me hard. I tightened my hold on her and pulled her on my lap. She straddled me and my heart started beating faster. "I love you too," she said quietly after she stopped kissing me. My eyes widened and I was completely sure that I would pass out from excitement. Hearing her say that was like injecting myself with the best drug in the whole world. It was addicting and I wanted more. "Say it again," I mumbled as I leaned my forehead against hers. "Please say it again." "I love you," she repeated and smiled a little. Something between a groan and a sob escaped my lips. I kissed her again, tangling my fingers into her hair and pressing her as close to me as I could. I could feel her smiling and I couldn't help but do the same. The happiness I felt was hard to describe. We stopped kissing and I hugged her tightly. She hugged me back and took a deep breath. "I am so sorry about Mike, Princess," I said quietly. "He made a huge mistake when he left you. I was so angry at him when he told me that he had a daughter and a mate and that he left them. Mates and children are a gift from the goddess and they should be cherished." Maddie stopped hugging me. She looked at me and nodded. "I almost made the same mistake my father did," she mumbled quietly. I caressed her cheek and smiled. "Good thing I am stubborn," I said, chuckling. "I wasn't going to let you do it. I was never going to let you leave me." Maddie smiled and placed another soft kiss on my lips. "Thank you for being stubborn," she said, making me chuckle. I kissed her soft lips and her cheek. I pulled her back into a hug and held her tightly. "Are you tired, Princess?" I asked. "Do you want to go to our room?" She nodded and I smiled. I couldn't stop smiling and I couldn't wait to lie next to her. I tried to let go of her so we could stand up and leave the office, but she tightened her hold on me and made herself comfortable. "5 more minutes," she mumbled quietly and I laughed. I tightened my hold on her and kissed her temple. "Okay, my princess," I said, chuckling. 5 more minutes. It was like she thought that I wouldn't be holding her just like this when we got to our room. I would always hold her just like this. I would never let go of her. It was impossible for me to do so. She was a part of my body and soul and I would never let her go. Yes, Alpha. Madeline's POV. Waking up in Dimitri's arms was the best thing in the world. I never felt safer. I never felt more loved. Good morning, beautiful, he said as he placed another kiss on my neck. How did you sleep? I ran my hand down his muscular back and pressed myself closer to him. Really well, I said, keeping my eyes closed. You. Dimitri ran his hand down my body until he reached the back of my knee. He pulled my leg up and placed it over his waist. I still didn't get my stuff from Mike's house, so I was sleeping in one of Dimitri's shirts. My legs were bare and feeling his soft fingers on my bare skin did all sorts of funny stuff to me. Sleeping with you will always result in the best sleep of my life, Dimitri said softly. I smiled and opened my eyes. He was already looking at me and the love I saw in his eyes made me shiver. He smiled and pressed a soft kiss on my lips. I will go get your stuff today, princess, he said as he stopped kissing me. I took a deep breath and bit my lower lip. Can I come too? I asked and he furrowed his eyebrows a little. Are you sure? He asked. I don't want my mother to make you uncomfortable. I gulped and felt a wave of nervousness and fear wash over me. I was ashamed to admit it, but I was scared of Janet. I was scared of what she might do or say. But my love for Dimitri was a lot bigger than my fear of his mother. If I was going to stay with him and be a Luna, I needed to start acting like it. I wanted to make peace with my dad and Janet. I wanted to start over. I am sure, I said, trying not to show him how nervous I really was. I want to talk to Mike and your mom. I want to start over. Dimitri gave me a small smile. He nodded and caressed my cheek. Okay, princess, he said. But if she says one wrong thing, I am taking you out of there. I won't let her hurt you. I smiled and kissed him softly. He groaned and tightened his arms around me. There is nothing I would love more than to stay in this bed with you, but we have work to do, he mumbled against my lips. I nodded and tried to let go of him. He didn't let me, though. He tightened his arms around me and kissed me hard. I chuckled and he smiled. Letting you get out of this bed is a bit harder than I thought it would be, he mumbled against my lips. I smiled and ran my fingers through his soft hair. We will be back here tonight, I said and he nodded. That is the only reason why I am letting you go now, he said as he moved his arms so I could stand up. I chuckled and sat up. Dimitri got out of bed and I couldn't help but stare into his muscled arms. The t-shirt he wore to bed was tight and I could see the contours of his body perfectly. The sight made me drool a little. I tried to imagine how he would look without his shirt on and I had to hold back a groan. Stop, Madeline, or I will never let you out of that bed, Dimitri said, his voice deep and raspy. He turned around and I saw him tightening his jaw. My eyes widened and I furrowed my eyebrows. How did he? I can smell your arousal, Madeline, he said, clenching his fists. You need to get out of that bed and go get dressed before I come back and check how wet you are. I took in a sharp breath and I was sure that his words only made me wetter. Maddie, he growled and I jumped out of bed immediately. I rushed toward the bathroom, trying so hard not to look back at him. You are going to kill me, woman. He mind-linked me and I couldn't help but chuckle. I'm sorry. I said. You are really handsome. I could hear him groan and I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Just hurry up, will you? He said. The sooner we leave, the sooner we can come back. Yes, Alpha. I said, trying to sound a bit seductive. He growled and I heard him approaching the bathroom. I guess it sounded a bit more seductive than I intended it to. My heart raced as he opened the door and barged inside. He closed the distance between us and kissed me hard. I moaned quietly and he picked me up. I wrapped my arms around his waist and he slapped my butt. He pressed me against the wall and started kissing my neck. My whole body shivered when he reached my marking spot and started sucking on it. I tangled my fingers into his hair and tightened my legs around him, pressing him closer to me. "Madeline," he growled as he bit my marking spot gently. I flinched and moaned loudly. "Say it again," he said quietly. I knew exactly what he wanted to hear. I started kissing his neck until I reached his ear. I placed a soft kiss behind it and tightened my legs around him. "Yes, Alpha," I whispered softly and his whole body shivered. He mumbled and I continued kissing his neck. He reached under my shirt and squeezed my hip. His touch sent shivers down my spine, and I moaned again. We were both panting hard. I could feel every muscle in his body clenching. He kept grunting and growling. I could have sworn that the temperature in the room was rising by the second. I'd never done anything like that before, but I somehow knew what to do. I somehow knew that kissing his jaw would make him moan. I somehow knew that biting his lower lip would drive him insane. "Maddie," he groaned quietly and kissed me hard. I felt like my body was going to burn up in flames. He slowed down a little and I could feel him take a deep breath. "We need to stop," he mumbled as he stopped kissing me. He leaned his forehead on mine and took a deep breath. I didn't want to stop, but I knew that he was right. We had to stop. "You are going to drive me insane," he said as he placed another soft kiss on my lips. I smiled and kissed him back. I couldn't believe that just 2 days ago I wanted to leave the pack. I couldn't believe that I ever thought that I could survive without him. I was completely his and no one could separate me from him. Not even myself. The talk. Madeline's POV. Dimitri lifted my hand and kissed it. "Are you sure, princess?" he asked. "I can go in there by myself." I shook my head and took a deep breath. "No," I said. "I am a Luna and I need to do this." Dimitri groaned and I looked at him, furrowing my eyebrows. "Did I say something wrong? How does everything you say turn me on so much?" he mumbled. I chuckled and shook my head. Dimitri rolled his eyes playfully and opened the door to Mike's house. "Mike," he called him as we walked inside. I heard footsteps approaching the living room and a second later Mike walked inside with a huge grin on his face. "Mads," he exclaimed as he approached me. "Congratulations, honey. It is so nice to finally have you in our pack." Mike looked so excited and I could tell that he wanted to hug me. He didn't push it, though. He knew that I wasn't comfortable with it. "Thank you," I said, giving him a small smile. "Where is my mother?" Dimitri asked, making Mike look at him. "She is in the kitchen," Mike said, glancing back at me. "I tried talking to her, but..." He stopped talking and shook his head a little. Dimitri tightened his hand around mine. I could feel his anger growing. "That's okay," I said before Dimitri could do or say anything. "I came here to talk to both of you." Mike furrowed his eyebrows a little. "Can we go into the kitchen?" I asked, giving him another smile. "Of course, honey," Mike said and let us walk past him. Dimitri pulled me closer to him as we were entering the kitchen. Janet looked at me and I was immediately hit with her thoughts. "I want to kill her. I will find a way to get rid of her." I gasped quietly and stopped walking. Her thought was like a punch to my gut. I furrowed my eyebrows in confusion. I couldn't hear anyone's thoughts all morning. Dimitri's touch kept them all away. Why could I hear her thoughts then? Dimitri was next to me. He was holding my hand. I couldn't hear Mike's thoughts, but I could hear hers. Why hers? Are you okay, princess? Dimitri mind-linked me. We can go if you changed your mind. I didn't change my mind. I had to do it. I could handle a few of her thoughts. I kept my eyes on Janet's and took a deep breath. I am okay. I mind-linked him back. I want to do this. Do you want some coffee? Mike asked as he walked past us and toward Janet. Yes, please, Dimitri said and looked at me. Maddie. I nodded, not looking away from Janet. You will pay for everything, Madeline. She mind-linked me. Don't get too comfortable with my son. He isn't yours. He will never be yours. You will never be Luna or Queen. You should have left when you had a chance. I tried so hard not to react to her words. I tried so hard not to flinch. I tried so hard not to show how painful her words were. We need to tell Dimitri, Sky whined. She can't talk to you like this, Maddie. I swallowed the lump in my throat. We can't, I said. She is his mom. I don't want him to fight with her because of me. I don't want him to lose her. Losing my mom was the most painful thing I ever had to go through. I didn't want Dimitri to go through that. Sky whined but remained silent. Sit down, guys, please, Mike said and Dimitri pulled me to the table. Mike placed 2 coffee mugs in front of us and sat down. He smiled at me. I took a deep breath and tried to remember all the things I wanted to tell him. I wanted to speak with him before Janet. I assumed that talking to Janet would be much harder and I knew that I wouldn't be in the right mindset to talk to Mike after my conversation with Janet ended. I am angry at you, Mike, I said, being as direct as possible. I have been angry at you for a long time. I didn't want to come here and I wanted to leave the day I turned 18. I didn't want to be around you and I didn't want to see you ever again. Mike's eyes widened and he gulped. You left me and my mom, I continued, trying so hard to keep my voice from shaking. I needed a dad and you took him away from me. You chose power over your family and that is something I have a hard time accepting. I saw tears in Mike's eyes. I could feel my heart clenching painfully. Dimitri placed a kiss on my temple and placed his arm around my shoulders. I could feel Janet's burning gaze on the side of my face. I didn't let her distract me. I had to remain focused on Mike. But I can't leave this pack, I continued after a few moments of silence. My mate is here. I love him and I don't want to leave him. I love you too. Dimitri mind-linked me. I glanced at him and smiled. So I need to find a way to forgive you, Mike, and I wanted to start by telling you how I honestly feel, I said, looking back at Mike. I needed to get that off my chest. I need a fresh start. I want to be a good Luna and I can't do that with this anger I'm carrying around. A tear fell on Mike's cheek and he reached over the table to take my hand in his. I will try to forgive you, Mike, I said before he could speak. You did what you thought would be best at the time. You found your happiness here. You found a mate and a son and I don't want to blame you for that. I took a deep breath and squeezed his hand. I will need some time, though, I continued. I will need time to work through this anger. Goddess, I am so proud of you. Dimitri mind-linked me and pulled me to his chest. You are an amazing Luna. I am so sorry, honey, Mike said. I completely understand your anger. You are right to be angry and I will give you as much time as you need. Mike squeezed my hand and smiled through his tears. You are already an amazing Luna and I am so proud to be your dad, he added. I smiled back at him and took a deep breath. What a pathetic little lying. I can't wait to get rid of her. Janet's thoughts made me flinch. I looked at her and took a deep breath. It was time for me to try to talk to her. Maybe there was a way to salvage this. Maybe there was a way for us to have a civilized relationship. SKOL. Dimitri's POV. To say that I was proud of her would be an understatement. I was so proud and so turned on by the way she was carrying herself and by the way she was speaking. I imagined bending her over the table and sliding inside her. I imagined telling her how good she was. I imagined her moaning my name and calling me Alpha, just like she did this morning. I needed to remain focused. I couldn't do those things to her now. We were at our parents' house and that was not the place for me to have these thoughts. I watched as my princess took a deep breath and looked at my mother. Janet, she spoke softly, but my mother interrupted her. It's Luna Janet to you, my mother said, making the anger inside me explode. And don't even think that you can sell me some pathetic story about you wanting to have a relationship with me. It will never happen, Madeline. I want you out of my son's life and out of my pack. I saw red. I growled loudly and tried to stand up. Maddie stopped me and shook her head. Let me do this, please. She mind-linked me. I looked at her and tightened my jaw. She looked back at my mother and furrowed her eyebrows. Why? She asked. What did I do, Luna? If you could tell me, maybe I could work on it. If you could. You can't change who you are, Madeline, my mother interrupted her. You are an orphan who isn't good enough to be a Luna and a queen. My son deserves better. My son had better. I had a perfect family and you had to come here and ruin it. By the time my mother was done talking, she was screaming at Maddie and pacing around the room. I was enraged. How dare she talk to my mate like that? Apologize. I shouted as I stood up. I won't let you talk to my mate like that. Apologize now. My mother looked at me and crossed her arms over her chest. Don't make me order you, mother, I said, growling. I will do it. Apologize to her right now. My mother narrowed her eyes and tightened her jaw. Apologize, Janet, or I am leaving, Mike said, making me look at him wide-eyed. I will not stand by and let you talk to my daughter like that. He was furious. I saw his eyes change color. His claws and canines elongated. My mother gasped loudly and looked at Maddie. Do you see what you did? My mother screamed, pointing at Mike. My mate wants to leave me because of you. My mother looked up at me and continued speaking before any one of us could protest. What do you see in her, Dimitri? My mother screamed. You have a perfect mate. You have a child with her. Savannah still loves you and she will take you back immediately. Stop this nonsense and go back to your true mate. The growl that escaped me made the windows in the house shake. I couldn't keep SKOL back. He was furious. He took over in a second and rushed toward my mother. He grabbed her neck and growled in her face. Her eyes widened and she tried to move his hand away. I watched what he was doing and gave him complete control. I wanted him to scare my mother. SKOL. Maddie yelled and grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from my mother. Mike shifted and growled at SKOL. Let go, SKOL, please. Maddie begged, trying to pull him away. Apologize, I said, my voice deep and blood-chilling cold. Now. I could feel my mother gulp. Skol only grabbed her by the neck. He didn't squeeze. She could still breathe and talk. It's okay, Skol, she doesn't have to, Maddie cried out. Let her go, please. Let's go home. Skol narrowed his eyes at my mother and growled. Apologize, I ordered, and my mother whimpered quietly. Skol, Maddie spoke again, but Skol interrupted her by growling loudly. Apologize, I repeated the order, and my mother whined loudly. Mike growled, but Skol ignored him completely. Mike was completely harmless. Even if he attacked, Skol could take him down in one move. I am sorry, my mother mumbled quietly, still trying to get out of Skol's hold. Skol growled in her face and tightened his hold a little. We will always choose Maddie over you, I told her. Maddie is our mate. Our priority. Stop insulting her. Stop talking about Savannah as if she was our mate. Stop hurting my mate. My mother's eyes widened. The hate Skol saw in her eyes made him growl again. Let's go, Skol, please, Maddie cried out, tugging on his arm again. Skol let my mother go. He looked at Mike and growled. Give me control back, Skol, I said, but he ignored me. No, he said. I want Maddie. He turned toward our mate and shivered. This was the first time he saw her while being in his own body. He pulled her to him and picked her up. He made her wrap her arms and legs around him. He buried his snout into her hair and took a deep breath. Mine, I said quietly as Skol rushed out of the house. Maddie ran her fingers through his fur and Skol growled in ecstasy. Mine, 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 I kept repeating as Skol was running back toward the pack house. I am yours, Skol, Maddie said quietly, making both Skol and me shiver in excitement. Skol ignored everything and everyone we passed on our way to the pack house. He was completely focused on Maddie. I could feel him sniff her, lick her, and touch her. She kept chuckling quietly and Skol felt like he was high on drugs. Skol ran into our office and slammed the door shut. He turned around and pressed Maddie against the wall. She smiled and ran her fingers through his fur again. He purred and licked her face gently. Hi, Skol, she said softly. I am so happy to see you. Skol purred again and buried his nose into her neck. He licked it gently and Maddie shivered. Let me back, Skol, I said, feeling the need to hold Maddie grow inside me. He growled and I could feel his annoyance grow. I knew he wanted more time with Maddie, but I didn't give a crap. I wanted to hold her. Skol reluctantly placed Maddie on the ground and took a few steps back. I shifted back and took her into my arms immediately. She wrapped her arms and legs around me as tightly as she could. I took a deep breath and let her scent soothe me. Your first time. Madeline's POV. I kept rubbing Dimitri's back gently. I could feel the anger pulsating inside him. I wanted to soothe him. I didn't want him to be angry at his mom. No matter what she did or said to me, I didn't want his relationship with her to get damaged. I didn't want him to lose his mom. I am so sorry, Maddie, he mumbled after a few minutes. I will talk to her. I promise. I will never let her say anything bad ever again. I turned my head and placed a soft kiss on his neck. He groaned quietly and tangled his fingers into my hair, holding me close to him. I love you, princess, he said as he walked to the couch and sat down. I lifted my head and smiled at him. I leaned in and kissed him softly. I couldn't stop myself from doing it. Feeling his lips on mine was the best thing I ever experienced. I never wanted to stop kissing him. If we could just live our lives with our lips pressing against one another, I would be completely fine with that. Dimitri chuckled and I stopped kissing him. I looked at him and raised an eyebrow after I saw a small smirk on his face. Sky is a great source of information, Dimitri said, making me even more confused. He cupped my cheek and parted my lips with his thumb. I would also be fine with having your lips on mine all the time, he said, and my eyes widened. Sky! I exclaimed, making her laugh. Damien's smirk grew and I rolled my eyes at him. Don't roll your eyes at your alpha, he said, and his voice made my whole body tremble. It was deep and seductive. It made my lower belly stir and ache. It made my heart race and my whole body suddenly felt like it was burning. I kept staring at him wide-eyed. My breathing picked up as I felt his hand squeeze my butt. Be a good girl and kiss me, he said using that same deep, seductive voice, and I had no other choice but to obey. My lips touched his just as he grabbed the back of my neck and squeezed it a little. He wrapped his arm around my waist and pressed me closer to him. I ran my hands up and down his muscular arms and he shivered. Oh, Madeline, he mumbled as he started kissing my neck. I moaned loudly and tangled my fingers into his hair. He pressed me closer to him and sucked on my marking spot. My eyes rolled to the back of my head. My body felt like it was about to explode. You are driving me insane, Dimitri growled, pulling my head back. I was panting hard. He never moved his eyes from my lips. Goddess, I don't want to scare you, but I don't know how long I will be able to hold back from making love to you, Madeline, he said, and I had to swallow a moan. I need to make you mine in every way possible. I need to be inside you. He looked at me and groaned. I keep imagining it and you being beautiful isn't helping at all, he said. I need to make love to you, Madeline. My heart was going to give out. He squeezed the back of my neck gently. I love you, he said quietly. Oh, goddess, I loved him too. I loved him so much. I love you too, I said. And I want you to make love to me too. His eyes widened and he pulled me in for a kiss. His lips touched mine and the feeling sent a jolt of pleasure to my lower belly. If someone told me just 2 days ago that I would be telling Alpha Dimitri that I wanted him to make love to me, I would tell them that they were crazy. It was so hard for me to keep up with my emotions. The bond made everything inside me move at an unreasonable pace. I loved this man so much and I had no idea when that feeling started. You loved him even before you knew, Maddie, Sky said. You just didn't let yourself love him. I furrowed my eyebrows a little. You didn't know who he was, Maddie, Sky said. But your heart knew. Your heart knew from the moment you met him. Dimitri stopped kissing me and I wanted to whine. He leaned his forehead on mine and took a deep breath. We need to stop because your first time won't be on a couch in our office, he mumbled. A funny thought came to me. How do you know it would be my first time? I asked and bit my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Maybe it wouldn't. He lifted his head abruptly and I could hear his heartbeat increasing. What? He asked, tightening his hold on me. His breathing picked up and anger flashed in his eyes. I smiled and cupped his cheek. I leaned in and placed a soft kiss on his lips. I am kidding, I said, trying not to chuckle. You will be my first. He visibly relaxed and a growl escaped him. That wasn't funny and you will be punished for that, Madeline, he said seductively, and a mixture of pain and pleasure swirled in my lower belly. He smirked at me and leaned in. My heart felt like it was going to jump out of my chest when he went straight to my marking spot. He started sucking on it hard. His hands traveled down my body until he reached my butt. He slapped and squeezed it. He lifted his hips and his hard penis pressed against me, making me flinch and groan. He continued lifting his hips in a steady rhythm. I couldn't help but move my hips as well. I needed to rub myself against him. I needed to feel him. I needed to touch him. I needed to. Oh, goddess! An unknown feeling started intensifying between my legs. My movements quickened. I was rushing towards something I'd never felt before. I threw my head back and moaned. One more stroke and I would explode. Dimitri suddenly stopped moving and I wanted to whine. He grabbed my hips and looked up at me. He had a big smirk on his face as he leaned in and bit my lower lip. "That is for being mean," he mumbled. "Only good girls get to come, Madeline." My eyes widened and he leaned in to kiss me. My heart was drumming against my rib cage. All I could hear was my blood rushing through my veins. The area between my legs was pulsating painfully. Dimitri's kiss only made it worse. "I love you," he whispered and placed another soft kiss on my jaw. I tried to pull myself together a little. "I love you too," I mumbled, my voice weird. I sounded like a ran for hours. Dimitri chuckled and hugged me tightly. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Being in his arms was amazing and I didn't want him to let me go. "I trust you." Dimitri's POV. Stopping myself from making her hardest I ever had to do. I imagined her moaning my name so many times and I couldn't believe that managed to stop myself. On the other hand, I didn't want to miss her first. There were too many layers of clothes between us. I wanted to feel and taste her. I wanted to feel her clenching around my fingers. I wanted to lick her clean and taste every drop. I took a deep breath and released it slowly. I needed to calm down a bit. I was so hard. It was painful. "Dimitri, my princess called me." I kissed her shoulder and let her go. "Yes, my love?" I asked as I smiled and caressed her cheek. "I would like to go to the diner," she said, making me furrow my eyebrows. "Why, princess?" I asked. "You are not working there anymore. You never needed to work there. I allowed it because I couldn't tell you that I was your mate and that I would take care of you." "I know," she said. "I would still like to thank Molly for giving me a job." She looked down at her lap and sighed. "I need to talk to Seth too," she said quietly. A wave of jealousy washed over me. I didn't want her near him. I didn't want her near any other male for that matter. "About what, princess?" I asked, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. She looked up at me and sighed. "He is my friend," she said. "He has been my friend since I came here." He thought that. She stopped talking and took a deep breath. "That you were his mate," I finished, feeling the words burn my tongue and lips. She nodded. I gulped and ran my fingers through my hair. I didn't want to be an overbearing and overpossessive mate, but I really didn't want her to talk to any other male. A part of me wanted to lock her up in a room and keep her all to myself. A part of me wanted to be the only one who could look at her, talk to her and touch her. I knew how crazy that was, but I couldn't lie to myself and say that it wasn't true. It was. I wanted her all to myself. She was mine and I wanted that to be true in every way possible. Mine to look at. Mine to touch. Mine to do everything I wanted to her. Skol stirred and I knew he completely agreed with me. I was a leakin and every emotion related to my mate was enhanced. I loved her more than a normal werewolves loved their mates. I needed her more than normal werewolves needed their mates. I was more protective and more possessive than them. But I was also a rational man who knew that locking her up and keeping her all for myself wasn't an option. She was a Luna and a queen. She was a wonderful woman who didn't deserve an irrational mate. So I did something that went against every animalistic instinct I had. I smiled and gave her a small nod. "Okay, princess," I said softly. "Do you want me to go with you?" She furrowed her eyebrows a little and studied my face for a moment. I smiled and caressed her cheek. "Did you think that I was going to forbid you from going to see him?" I asked, and she gave me a reluctant nod. I smiled again and placed a soft kiss on her lips. "I trust you, princess," I said softly. "I know that you won't do anything to hurt me. I also know that you will tell me if he tries anything while I'm not there. I would also be able to feel it if he touched her. I would know immediately and I would rip him apart. No one touched what was mine. She was mine to touch. She was mine to kiss. She was mine to worship and love." She nodded and I kissed her again. I tangled my fingers into her hair and kept my lips on hers until we both ran out of breath. I didn't mind dying like that, though. Leaving this world with the taste of her in my mouth was the best way to go. "Do you want me to go with you?" I asked again after I stopped kissing her. She shook her head and gave me a small smile. "It's okay," she said. "I won't be long." "You better not be," I said sternly. "An hour, tops. I can't be without you longer than that." She smiled and gave me a small nod. I kissed the tip of her nose and caressed her back. I remembered something at that moment. "What about the voices, princess?" I asked worriedly. "Are they back?" She gulped and took a deep breath. "Not while you are with me," she said. "But I will be okay for an hour. Maybe I will even find a way to deal with them without you." I didn't like that, but I nodded and kissed her again. The kiss was short and sweet. "Come back immediately if it gets too much, okay?" I said. "Or just mind link me and I will come get you." She nodded and kissed me again. I wished that neither she nor I had any obligations. I wished that we could just stay in this room forever. The diner wasn't far away and that was one of the reasons I allowed her to go without me. The other reason was that I wanted to talk to Will alone. I needed to find someone who knew what those voices meant. Someone had to know why she could read minds or whatever else it was. I was planning on starting by talking to the doctor who helped me when Savannah told me she was pregnant with my pup. I let Maddie go and I had to hold back a whine. I would glue her to me if it was possible. "I love you," she told me and gave me a small smile. I placed my arms on the backrest of the couch. I clenched my muscles and smirked when I saw Maddie gulp. "I love you too, Madeline," I said, using the voice I knew would make her knees buckle. "Be back soon, okay?" She nodded and turned around. She rushed out of the room like her ass was on fire. "Those muscles will wait for you when you come back, princess." I mind-linked her. I heard her groan and I laughed. I was so happy that she was attracted to me. The love in her eyes was all I ever wanted. "Seth." Madeline's POV Luna. Macy exclaimed excitedly when I walked inside the diner. I flinched a little. I wasn't used to hearing that. I sounded weird. It sounded wrong. "Stop it," Sky growled at me. I ignored her and smiled at Macy. "It's Maddie," I said as I approached the counter. "Please don't call me Luna." Macy chuckled and shook her head. I looked around the diner. A few people were eating their breakfast, but it was mostly empty. The people smiled at me and bowed their heads. I smiled back before sitting on one of the bar stools. I could hear their thoughts. I couldn't understand exactly what they were thinking, but I could hear them. I tried so hard to ignore them. I tried so hard to focus on Macy and shut everything else out. I could hear her thoughts as well, but I ignored them. I didn't want to know what she was thinking. I didn't want to pry. It was hard, though. It was so hard trying to quiet down those voices. "What are you doing here, Maddie?" Macy asked. "You are not here to work, are you?" "Alpha will have my head if I allow his Luna to work." I smiled and shook my head. "I am not here to work even though I wouldn't mind working," I said. "I came here to talk to you and say thank you for giving me a job." Macy stopped wiping and looked up at me. "You are welcome, honey," she said softly. "It was a pleasure working with you." She reached out and took my hand in hers. "You will be an amazing Luna," she said. "Your mom would be so proud of you." I felt tears in the corners of my eyes. Macy was the only one in this pack I talked about my mom with. She reminded me of my mom a little. Both of them were so kind and loving. Both of them made me feel safe when I needed it the most. "Thank you, Macy," I said, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. The kitchen door opened and Seth walked out. I looked at him and took a deep breath. "Hi, Mads," he said quietly. I could hear the sadness in his voice and it made my heart clench painfully. I never wanted to hurt him. "Hi, Seth," I said, my voice quiet and raspy. "Can we talk for a second?" Macy let my hand go and I stood up. Seth gave me a small nod and opened the kitchen door. I walked toward him, rubbing my palms together and trying to calm myself down a little. "Goddess, why didn't you give her to me?" Seth's thought made me flinch a little. I gulped and turned around to see him close the kitchen door. "He let you come here by yourself?" Seth asked as he leaned against the door. "If she was mine, I wouldn't let her walk around without me. She is too perfect for that." His thought made me shiver. I tightened my jaw and forced my brain to shut everything down. I wanted to talk to Seth. I didn't want to hear his thoughts. "He did," I said, giving him a small nod. "He trusts me." Seth nodded and took a deep breath. "I am sorry, Seth," I said quietly. "I didn't want this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." Seth tightened his jaw and shook his head. "You didn't hurt me, Maddie," he said quietly. "The goddess did. She doesn't have her mark yet." "Did she reject him? Do I still have a chance?" "If she was mine, I would sink my canines into her neck the moment I found out she was my mate." "He let her walk around without marking her? What is wrong with him?" I flinched and clenched my fists. I pushed his thoughts away. I didn't want to hear those things. I didn't want to know what he was thinking. My head started pulsating and my stomach twisted. I was already exhausted and it wasn't long since I came to the diner. "Where is your mark, Maddie?" Seth asked as he started approaching me. "Did you reject him?" The hope in his voice made my heart clench. He stopped in front of me and gulped. "I didn't," I said, shaking my head. "He will mark me soon." An unknown emotion flashed in Seth's eyes. He tightened his jaw and gave me a nod. His eyes studied my face for a few moments. I was a bit uncomfortable. He was standing too close. "She is beautiful. Why isn't she mine? I will never want anyone except her." "Do you really want him to mark you, Maddie?" Seth asked as he raised his hand and cupped my cheek. Do you really love him? I tensed up and took a step back. His hand fell from my cheek and a look of hurt flashed in his eyes. I do, I said quietly. I love him. He is my mate. Seth tightened his jaw and nodded. I will be here if you change your mind, he said quietly. I will always be here, Maddie. I would take her even with his mark on her beautiful body. She would be mine and nothing else would matter. I flinched and took another step back. Seth furrowed his eyebrows a little. I have to go, I said, giving him a small smile. Dimitri is waiting for me. Seth nodded and stepped aside so I could walk past him. I approached the door and opened it. I looked back at him and smiled again. Call me if you ever need help at the diner, I said. I will miss working here. Seth smiled and nodded. I will miss it too, Maddie. I will miss seeing her beautiful face every day. I should have done something sooner. I should have kissed her sooner. I should have made her fall in love with me sooner. She would reject him then. She would be mine if I did something sooner. My stomach twisted into a knot. I had to get out of there as soon as possible. I forced another smile on my face before I stepped out of the kitchen. Are you hungry, Mads? Macy asked and I shook my head. No, thank you, I said politely. I didn't need food. I needed Dimitri. I needed him to hold me so I would feel safe. I needed him so the voices would stop. I needed him because I already missed him. I said goodbye to Macy before I rushed out of the diner. I couldn't wait to walk into Dimitri's arms. The healer. Dimitri's POV. You let her go alone. Will exclaimed. Are you crazy? He is in love with her. I looked up at him and sighed. I trust her, Will, I said. I can't keep her locked up in here. Trust me, I would be happiest if I could lock her up and keep her to myself, but that's not possible. Will rolled his eyes and sat down. I don't trust him, he said. He could try something. I flinched and I had to hold back a growl. I would rip him apart if he tried something. How is that your concern? I asked, trying not to show how annoyed I was. Will looked at me and rolled his eyes again. She is my Luna, he said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I swore to protect her the moment I became your beta. She is my priority and you know that. I did know that. Protecting Maddie was the most important part of his job. If there was an attack and our lives were in danger, Will had sworn to save her, not me. He swore to protect her from everyone, even me. Seth won't hurt her, I said. He is a good kid. I was sure of that and it was one of the reasons I let her go alone. I knew he wouldn't hurt her. I knew she wouldn't do anything to hurt me and I knew that she would tell me everything he did or said to her. I trusted her with every part of my body and soul. Will she be back soon? Will asked. I told her to be back in an hour, I said, looking back down at the paper in my hand. I can't be without her longer than that. Is that a new contract for Dr. Jackson? Will asked and I nodded. Yes, I said. I will offer him a job here at our pack. When will he be here? Will asked and I looked at the watch on my left wrist. In about 4 hours, I said. He called as he was leaving his house. Will you talk to him about Maddie? Will asked, making me look up at him. I took a deep breath and nodded. I was nervous to talk about it with him, but I needed to do it. I needed someone to help me figure out what was going on. Will gulped and bit his lower lip. I have a confession to make, he said and I narrowed my eyes a little. A confession? I asked with confusion in my voice. Will nodded and ran his fingers through his hair. I talked to Ellie about it, Will said, his voice laced with guilt. She said we should talk to a healer, not a doctor. Will looked at me apologetically. I sighed and shook my head at him. I wasn't happy with the fact that he shared that secret with her, but Ellie was one of the people I trusted the most. She was smart, kind, and loving. She was an amazing wolf and a huge asset to my pack. If she was older than Will, she would probably be my beta. I know that I shouldn't have talked to her without your permission, but it's Ellie, Will said. You know I can't keep anything from her. I rolled my eyes at him. He was right, though. He always told her everything. I know, and it's annoying, I mumbled, trying to stop myself from rolling my eyes again. She is excited to meet Maddie, Will said with a small smile on his face. I smiled a little. I was excited for them to meet too. I knew that they would get along great. They were a lot alike. When is she coming back? I asked. Ellie was in a training facility just outside our pack. Will often ran to the border to see her and talk to her. In a few days, Will said excitedly. She is almost done with the program. She was in a training program for elite warriors. Mike was the one who started training our wolves, but the word got around and other packs were interested in joining. Mike and I decided it would be good for the kingdom to have a few selected elite warriors in each pack. Ellie was one of those who earned the spot in Mike's program, and I was incredibly proud of her. I was thinking about making her Maddie's personal guard, I said, and Will nodded immediately. I trust her completely, and she is not a male, so Skol won't be so uncomfortable leaving Maddie with her. I agree, Will said. Ellie will be great at it. She is already so excited to meet Maddie, and she is already so protective of her. She almost lost it when I told her about what Savannah did. Skol growled when Will said that's name. I really want to exile her, I said angrily. I just wish she would tell me who the father is. I don't want that child to grow up without at least one parent. Will sighed and shook his head. She will never do that, Will said. She knows that's the only thing keeping her here. I knew that, and it had annoyed me so much. No one wanted to take that child, and I wasn't so cruel to separate him from his mother and put him in an orphanage. I didn't want him to grow up as a rogue either. So, the healer? I asked, changing the subject. Will took a deep breath and nodded. Ellie said that the healers could know more about that type of magic than the doctor, Will said. That made sense. We don't have a healer in our pack, though, I said. Will smiled. Leave it to me. I will find one. I nodded. We should still talk to the doctor, though. Of course, Will agreed. Maybe he knows someone we could talk to about this. I nodded again and took a deep breath. I glanced at the watch on my wrist. Maddie left about 30 minutes ago, but I already missed her so much. I wished that she came back immediately. I wished that I could hold her and kiss her. I wasn't sure if I would be able to wait an hour for her. Who is Ellie? Dimitri's POV. My wish came true only a few minutes later. There was a knock on my door and I knew immediately it was Maddie. I was confused a bit because I was sure she would be gone for at least 20 more minutes. Come in, I said and stood up. Why was she knocking? She opened the door and a wave of relief washed over me. I smiled brightly, but my smile disappeared the moment I saw her face. What happened, princess? I asked as I walked around my desk. She rushed toward me and sighed in relief the moment I grabbed her. My heart was racing like crazy. Did someone do something to her? Was she hurt? Did Seth say something that upset her? Did he do something? Did he try something? Mads. Will called her worriedly. What happened? I ran my fingers through her hair and kissed the top of her head. I am okay, she mumbled quietly. The voices were too much. My heart clenched painfully. I needed to find a solution as soon as possible. Oh, princess, I mumbled as I picked her up and walked back to my chair. I sat down and placed her on my lap. I rubbed her back and she relaxed even more. I buried my nose into her hair and took a deep breath. Her scent soothed me and I was able to clear my mind a little. I missed her so much and having her in my arms felt amazing. I couldn't wait to lay next to her tonight. I couldn't wait to press my entire body against hers. Can you hear Dimitri's thoughts? Will asked, making her tense up a little. I looked at him and my eyes widened. I never thought of that. Maddie looked up at me and furrowed her eyebrows. I thought about the first time I saw her. If she could read my mind, I wanted her to know how I felt the moment my eyes landed on her beautiful face. No, she mumbled quietly and looked at Will. What does that mean? I was confused as well. She could hear everyone's thoughts except mine. I don't know, Will shrugged. I hope that the healer will have the answers. The healer? Maddie asked with confusion in her voice. I leaned in and placed a kiss on her jaw. I couldn't hold back. I needed to feel her soft skin against my lips. Ellie suggested we talk to a healer instead of a doctor, Will explained. She said that healers could know more about these types of magic. Maddie furrowed her eyebrows. Who is Ellie? She asked, making Will smile. She is my sister, Will said. You will get to meet her soon. She will be your guard, princess, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She is currently in an elite training program run by Mike. She will be back in a couple of days. Maddie looked at me and her eyes widened a little. Mike runs a training program, she asked. He does, I confirmed. Your dad is an amazing warrior and he came up with a course for elite warriors. Ellie is one of them. Maddie furrowed her eyebrows again. Why do I need a personal guard? She asked, making both Will and I sigh at the same time. You are a Luna and a queen, I explained. I need to ensure your safety at all times. I smiled and caressed her cheek. You will love Ellie, I said. You two are a lot alike. She is kind and loving. She is one of my best friends and I trust her completely. An unknown emotion flashed in Maddie's eyes. I tried to catch it by focusing on our bond, but it was gone before I could figure it out. She is so excited to meet you, Will said, making Maddie look at him. She already likes you a lot, Mads. I could see the confusion on Maddie's face. Will tells her everything, I said, trying to explain what Will meant. Ellie already knows a lot about you and she already likes you. Maddie looked back at me and gave me a small nod. I caressed my cheek and used our bond to try to figure out what she was feeling. I came up empty, though. Will stood up and I looked at him. I will go get everything ready for the doctor's arrival, Will said. I will be back later. I nodded and watched as he left our office. As soon as the door behind him closed, I cupped Maddie's cheeks and kissed her softly. She placed her hands over mine and moaned quietly. Goddess, I missed you, I mumbled against her lips. I don't like being apart from you. Maddie smiled a little. She kissed me again and I groaned. I don't like it either, she said quietly. I caressed her cheek and lifted my head so I could get a better look at her. Something was off. What happened at the diner? I asked. Something must have happened there. Something made her upset and it wasn't the voices. Not entirely at least. She sighed and bit her lower lip. Did Seth say something? I asked as my heart raced. Did he try something? Maddie shook her head immediately. No, she said. He was a bit sad. He didn't do anything, but, she stopped talking and took a deep breath. But? I asked, trying to stop my voice from trembling. I needed to contain the anger that was pulsating inside my body. What did he do to her? His thoughts were, she said, but stopped talking and took a deep breath. I tightened my arms around her. What was she going to say? The worst part is that I don't even know if those were his thoughts or if I am just making it all up, she mumbled quietly. What if I am crazy? What if I am sick? What if? I interrupted her by pressing my lips on hers. You are not crazy, princess, I said quietly. You are not sick. You can hear other people's thoughts and we will figure out what it means. She took a deep breath and leaned her head on my shoulder. I kissed her temple and wrapped my arms around her. What was he thinking, Maddie? I asked. I need you to tell me everything. I needed to know if she was in danger. I needed to know if his thoughts were violent. I needed to protect her. She was my whole world and I needed to make sure that she was safe. I barely lived through those 30-something minutes that she was gone. If something happened to her or if someone took her from me, I would die. I wouldn't survive that. I needed her to breathe. I needed her to live. I needed her so my heart would continue beating. In his arms. Madeline's POV. How are you, princess? Dimitri asked softly as I sat down on the bed. He wrapped his arms around me and every ache in my body and soul was gone. Tired, I said. And a bit relieved maybe. Dr. Jackson confirmed that I wasn't crazy. We did a small experiment. Dimitri left the room so I could hear doctor's thoughts. It worked and I was relieved to know that I wasn't crazy. Well, maybe I still was. Reading other people's minds wasn't exactly a sane thing to do. We will talk to a healer as soon as we find one, princess, Dimitri said softly. I lifted my head and looked at him. I know one, I said, making his eyes widen. You do? He asked, surprised. How? There is a healer in my former pack, I said. He helped my mom to cope with the pain. We could ask him to come. I am sure that he would be willing to help. Dimitri smiled and leaned in to kiss my cheek. I will bring him here tomorrow, princess, he said softly. We will figure this out. I promise. He bent his head down and placed a small kiss on my shoulder. I shivered and pressed myself closer to him. Goddess, how much I love you, he mumbled, making my heart skip a beat. I love you with every part of my body and soul, Madeline. I cupped his cheeks and kissed him. He groaned quietly and wrapped his arms around my waist. I love you too, I said quietly. I never thought that I would love someone so much. I never thought that I would even find my mate. I am so happy that I did. I am so happy that it is you. I love you. I could tell that he was holding back tears. I leaned in and kissed him softly. He tangled his fingers into my hair and held me close to him. You are my greatest treasure, princess, he said quietly as he buried his nose into my neck. I will love you even after I take my last breath. I will love you until the end of the world. I ran my fingers through his hair and he kissed my neck. His words made me melt and my knees buckle. It was a good thing I was sitting down. Are you hungry? He asked me and I shook my head. Not really, I said. I want to take a shower. Dimitri nodded and kissed my neck again. Would you mind taking one together? He asked quietly, making me tense up a little. I don't have any other intentions other than showering. I promise. He lifted his head and smiled at me. I studied his face for a moment. I was nervous. What if he didn't like what he saw? No one ever saw me before. What if he thought that I was ugly? What if he rejected me after he saw me? Dimitri leaned in and placed a soft kiss on my jaw. Sky is the biggest tattletale of all, he said with amusement in his voice. I think that you are perfect and I am not going to reject you after seeing you. I groaned and rolled my eyes. Sky. I whined, but she ignored me. Will my thoughts ever be just mine again? I mumbled angrily. Why is she telling you everything? Dimitri lifted his head and snorted. You can read other people's minds, he said. It is only fair that I get to read yours from time to time. I rolled my eyes and Dimitri slapped my butt. Don't roll your eyes at me, Madeline, he said, lowering his voice and making me shiver. My breath got caught in my throat when he gently started pulling my shirt up. I lifted my hands so he could take it off. My heart raced when I saw him staring at me with a wishful look in his eyes. Oh, Maddie, he mumbled. I shivered and gulped. He looked up at me and leaned in to kiss my lips softly. You are so perfect. I reached out and started pulling his shirt up. My hands were shaking, but I needed to see his perfect body. I needed to touch him. He helped me take his shirt off and I groaned when my eyes landed on his muscular chest. I reached out and ran my hand down his abs. He shivered and grunted. He was breathing heavily. Goddess, Maddie, he mumbled. I never want you to stop touching me. This is yours. I am all yours. I leaned in and placed a soft kiss on his collarbone. He growled quietly and tightened his arms around my waist. He picked me up and started walking toward the bathroom. I kept placing soft kisses on his neck and muscular shoulders. He kept shivering, groaning, and squeezing every part of my body he could reach. I was in heaven and I never wanted to leave. I wanted to stay in his arms forever. He put me down on the ground and I really wanted to whine. He reached behind me and turned the shower on. He cupped my cheeks and kissed my forehead. Can I take your jeans off? He asked and I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I was pretty sure that the lump was actually my heart. My whole body was buzzing with tingles and need for him. He kept his eyes on me the entire time and I thought that I would pass out. He leaned in and placed a soft kiss below my belly button. I couldn't help but cry out in pleasure. His lips felt amazing against my skin. He stood up, never moving his eyes from mine. He took my hands in his and placed them on his hips. I tucked my thumbs under the waistband of his pants and started pulling them down. I can stay in my boxers if it will make you more comfortable, he said as he stopped me from taking his pants off. I shook my head and continued pulling his pants down. He cupped my cheeks and kissed me hard. I moaned and let his pants fall down to the ground. He picked me up and I wrapped my legs around his waist. I felt everything and all I wanted to was moan in pleasure. I flinched a little when my back touched the cold tiles of the shower wall, but everything was forgotten when I felt his hands grab and squeeze my butt. His touches were like a drug and I knew that I would never stop needing them. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.